Good day, everybody. My name is Dr. Francois Tessier, CEO of the Center for Complementary Therapy and Pain Management in Sri Lanka. Welcome to this series of Zoom interview, where you will discover the most amazing doctor, therapists, philosophers, psychiatric doctors, artists, shaman, etc., that are practicing in a way, in their own manner, complementary therapy. These people come from all around the world and have all of sort of different point of view. And today, speaking of which, we have someone very special. Today we are going to have also a very special subject, because our guest today is Dr. PMH Atwater. She is an international authority on near-death state. She is from Charlottesville, Virginia, in the United States. And Dr. PMH Atwater is a lead researcher in the field of near-death studies. Doctor began her work in 1978, and she wrote over 18 books, I believe, covering thousands of adults and child experiencer of near-death states. Her book has been published in over 12 countries, and some of her findings have been verified in clinical published studies in serious journals, such as the Lancet Medical Journal. And Dr. PMH Atwater have received numerous decorations, awards for her work, including the Nancy E. Bush Award for Literacy Excellence. So she has presented her findings for many organizations and schools, including twice at the United Nations. She has been guest of hundreds of TV and radio shows to talk about her findings. And her interest on the subject started with her personal experience, because Dr. Atwater was raped, miscarried, and died 3 times in 3 months. She's going to talk about that today. She had a near-death experience each time. So she wrote a book to tell about her own story. This book is called I Died 3 Times in 1997, The Complete Story. It is available on Amazon.com. And Dr. Atwater became a researcher in the field of near-death studies because she was told during one of these near-death experience by the voice that she called The Voice Like No Other, another book that she wrote, to tell the story. This voice told her to tell the story, to write specific books, and she did. So she wrote so many books, and I could continue over and over and over to introduce you, Dr. Atwater. Welcome. Thank you so much for accepting my invitation. Your journey is just unbelievable and amazing. I'm very honored to have you with us. Welcome and thank you.
Hello, everybody. Yes, very happy to be here.
Thank you.
Some people say, you know, why do you do all this research? And I say, because I was told in my 3rd near-death experience, by what I call the voice like none other, to do this work.
They told you to.
Very specific. And I'll quote, test revelation.
Yes.
You are to do the research, 1 book for each death. Then it showed me what that meant. It did not name book 1. It did name books 2 and 3. Book 2 is future memory. It's out there.
Yes, yes.
Book 3 is a manual for developing humans. That, of course, is out there. And I've been doing.
And this book has won some awards, I think, huh? The Silver Nautilus Award, if I can remember.
Yes, it did. Yes.
Right.
So hey, I've been
yes, you've been there, huh?
I've been doing this for 44 years. Can you imagine?
Yeah, it's incredible. Well, Doctor, I have a very basic question, because our audience may not know what we're talking about when we're talking about
Okay.
near-death experience. Can you please describe this phenomenon, and can you explain so that they have a clear idea about that?
Sure. You betcha. Let me quote from the International Association for Near-Death Studies.
Yeah.
The NDE, the near-death experience, is an intense awareness, sense, or experience of otherworldliness, whether pleasant or unpleasant, that happens to people who are at the edge of death. It is of such magnitude that most experiencers are deeply affected, many to the point of making significant changes in their lives afterward. Now, this is what is consistently found by medical doctors. The phenomenon includes out-of-body experiences, clear enhanced consciousness, significant self-identity with emotions, cognition, which is thought perception, full use of faculties, intact memories when the brain is not working, when the heart is not working, when the lungs are not working. So all of this occurs while the individual is dead or nearly dead.
Clinically dead.
Clinically dead.
Right. Which you have lived. Well, I've lived. Which you have experienced, because you can have lived near that experience. What a paradox, my God.
And it can happen to anybody at any place, all over the world. You know, I wrote the big book of near-death experiences. That's an encyclopedia of the whole worldly, phenomenon. But in my more recent study, which is in the Forever Angels, near-death experiences in childhood and their lifelong impact, I then researched specifically those who had their near-death experience between birth and the age of 5.
Oh my God.
Really zeroed in on those in particular. I've written about children's cases before, but this time I wanted to zero in on that. And I want to say to everybody that Forever Angels is just very different.
Yes, the experience is completely different, right? So before we talk about that, because I'm keen to hear about this, because I think you're the only one that have covered this subject. I know nobody else that have done. Right, so you mentioned angels here, and I would like you to maybe describe the pattern of the experiencers, because you just described which is good because it's a medical phenomenon, right? It's a medical phenomenon. Right. But on the point of view of experiencers, it's another story, right? And you talk about angels, so explain this, because they hear voice. You heard voices. Who are they? Who are you talking about?
Some talk about angels, but not all of them do.
Okay.
Let me give you the basic pattern. Most of them have out-of-body experiences. Clearly, over 70% have out-of-body experience. That's number one. Number two is that special light. Adults will say that it's like 10,000 suns, and instantly you're fried, but there's no pain. So there's incredibly bright light.
Yeah.
Many are met on the other side by loved ones, sometimes by different kinds of figures, often by animals, often by birds,
Oh,
especially
really?
children, lots of birds, but certainly animals. If you had a pet that died before, many times that pet will be back. Many and there are also many of them go to different kinds of places,
Yeah.
and the next one is um, uh, the life review.
Yeah.
Um, Notice that I didn't say tunnels.
Ah,
Not that many go through tunnels.
oh, really?
Not that many go through tunnels.
Okay.
That's correct. Most of them will either have the out-of-body experience and or the bright light,
Yeah.
or um, uh, being met by loved ones, or they'll have a past life review.
Mm-hmm.
That's the most common. But
All
I
right.
also say that people who are not distressed, who are not in a hospital, who are not um, uh, they
Clinic.
too can have a near-death experience.
Yes.
So we can have it's called the near-death-like experience. Some
Oh,
people call it the fear death, when there's nothing wrong with the body, but there can be such a shock or something that occurs that they can have a full-blown near-death experience with all of the after effects. And please bear in mind that it is the after effects that validate the experience, not the other way around. There
mm.
is a pattern of physiological and psychological after effects that is always present, whether you had a near-death experience or a near-death-like experience.
So they are very much alike.
The after effects,
The after
yeah,
effects are alike, but they're not clinically dead.
yeah, right. You've got
Right.
the after effects, the pattern of the after effects, the integration of the experience. That validates, as as far as I'm concerned, the phenomenon itself.
Yeah, yeah. All right. So what are what are these angels? What are these boys? Who are they?
Some people are met by angels, but not consistently. So I'd like to pass on to you the child's version of
Yeah,
this
yeah,
day. Um, Many times a child will be they'll be visited or met by angels, but invariably they will say to the angel, "Is this what you really look like?" You know, the wings and, you know, our stereotypical version of an angel. And the
yeah.
child will go up and say, "Is this what you really look like?" And invariably, um, there will be this kind of like explosion or of light, and
Mm,
the angel turns into light.
yeah.
It doesn't have human form. It doesn't have wings. It just poof, and there you
It doesn't
got.
have feathers. It doesn't have
No,
a stereotype, right?
well, it can at first, but you know, if the child says, "Is this what you really look like?" Poof, yeah, there,
And
there's
all of
this
a sudden,
incredible
this is pure light. So we are talking here about light being.
light beings are just light itself.
Yes, light.
Yeah,
Light. Yes, light. So, what does this light want?
it's usually there for comfort. It's usually there for love. It's usually there for support. The greater light, which many call God's light, um, you know, children describe three lights, not one.
Oh,
With adults, we just talk about this incredible light that sort of fries you instantly. But children, there are three lights. There's this very raw, piercing, powerful light. Doesn't have any special color. Then there's the black light or the dark light, and often it will have purple tinges to it.
Oh.
And that light is so loving and so cuddling and so healing. And then there's this very bright light. We could call it a white light or a bright light. Sometimes it has silver tinges to it or gold tinges to it. But the children are very specific about these lights.
Yeah.
They say that this really bright, beautiful light that often talks to you,
Yeah.
that's Father light. And this beautiful black or shimmering dark light, that's Mother light.
Oh.
And that raw, powerful light, that's God's light.
Oh.
And the children are very specific. The Father light and the Mother light, they come from God's light.
Yes, of course.
So I love the way children describe that.
Mm-hmm. What are these voices are telling? Well, let's jump on your experience, doctor, please. What did these voices told you? How did you met them, and what did they tell you? Of course, They told you. We know that they told you to write books and talk about the subject. But what else?
Well, bear in mind, I had 3 in 3 months.
Yes.
And each was different.
Yes.
And in the first one, it was more like an in-depth out-of-body experience.
Mm-hmm.
My second one was sort of like a grand tour of the universe and being met by loved ones who had died and gone on. And Jesus came to me in my second near-death experience. In my third one, it was, that's hard to describe because I was in areas and places that I'd never been to before, never heard of before, above and beyond anything that I even possibly describe. And that voice, it spoke to me, and it was a single voice.
Oh.
It was like the entire universe speaking to me. It wasn't like a guide or a guardian or an angel or an archangel or any of that kind of stuff. It was like the whole universe talking to me.
Oh.
And it said, test revelation. You are to do the research. 1 book for each death. And of course, it didn't name book 1, but did 2 and 3. And it told me what to do, but it didn't tell me how to do it.
Oh, well, that's another story.
I'm a cop's kid. I was raised in a police station. So I grew up with that kind of interrogation, police officers, crimes. How do you do research?
You were a police officer? Are you telling me that
I was a police officer's daughter.
Ah, I thought you were a police officer.
No, daughter.
Okay.
And back in those days, and I was born in Twin Falls, Idaho. So back in those days in Twin Falls, Idaho, you could wait on your dad for his coffee breaks. Yeah. And then he could then take you home. So I was exposed to all kinds of crime, all kinds of issues that were occurring, including high-speed chases with me in the car.
Oh.
In those days, you didn't have television. So for me, television was a squad car windshield. Yeah. And so I'm staring, I couldn't talk, I couldn't move. That was the instructions. So I'm staring at that window and I'm watching how people use their bodies, what they're saying, the effect on that. And Dad would always say, the body says more than the mouth does. So you're watching, you're being a good observer. And I learned that as a child. I mean, that was always with me. So that's the way I did my research. I was very careful. I was very clear. I was very in depth. I do not use a scientific protocol on purpose, because to me, the scientific protocol is biased. You're using words before the individual. And if you're using a good analytical observation research, which is what I do, you never use a word in advance of the individual. Let's say, for instance, there's an automobile accident, there's 3 witnesses. A good cop will go to the first witness and say, did you see anything? They cannot use the word accident or car until the individual does.
Yeah.
So that's that. I'm very, very clear on that.
So you got your skills in the inquiry before the science came.
Always. And I did not use I did use questionnaires a couple of times, but only afterward.
Oh.
To double check.
Yes.
So all of my work is based on field work.
Yes.
Often I'm in people's homes, often in with the families. The health caregivers, the neighbors, anybody who would talk to me.
Yeah.
And
so, wait a minute. There's a question that raised in my mind because I'm intrigued. They told you what to do. They didn't tell you how, and suddenly, out of a sudden, it came. You were at the end of the day. You were doing it, weren't you? How did it came finally? You didn't provoke that. How did it happen?
In 1977, that was my time to learn to be a human being again. Because after my experiences were over, I had to relearn crawling, standing, walking, climbing stairs, how to see properly, hear properly, and rebuild all my belief systems. So 1977 for me was a lot of hard work on myself. Being a human being again, being able to think again, being able to, have a job again. In 1978, I was able to go to Chicago, Illinois to visit my aunt and uncle. And I met at the Chicago airport Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. I knew it was her because I'd seen pictures of her.
Yeah.
And so we sat down and talked like a couple of schoolgirls. And it was Elizabeth that I told my story to. And Elizabeth told me about the near-death phenomenon. She never mentioned Raymond Moody or his book. And she said I was a near-death survivor. She did not use the word experiencer. She used the word survivor.
Survivor.
And so from her, I got the name, near-death experience.
Yeah.
From her, I got the pattern. And I just took off. That was it. And I've been doing my work ever since.
Yes.
Nobody's been helping me. Nobody's been paying me.
It's
not
coming.
a single penny. I've been out there doing the work because I was told by the voice like none other to do it. So I did.
And the rest came. I guess that the rest came along, did it? Like this person that came your kind of a, not mentor, but your first starter, was it? That came along.
I started giving talks about my own experience. Well, I left Idaho. I was
Oh,
directed to leave Idaho and move to for Washington, D.C. area, which
yeah.
I did. And I found people there who would set up talks for me. And so I would be giving my own talks about my own experience. And afterward, I would find other people who'd had it. And so we would get together and we would talk. And that's that. Um, that's how it started.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Naturally, in a way, it came alone. It did it. It came
Yeah,
like it has to do. That there is a question that comes to my mind now. Um, is there some cases where it turns out bad? Is
oh,
there?
sure,
Yeah.
absolutely. There's hell as well as heaven.
Oh,
In my research base, 1 out of 7 had a hellish experience. So yes, that's absolutely true. If you get um, the big book of near-death experiences, there's a hellish case in there of a child who's about 6. There's also a hellish case in there of an adult. So you can certainly see uh, the actual experiences for those individuals that went through it. Their description, what they faced. For some, the hellish experience was like being sucked into like a whirlpool, and there's skulls floating around, and they're terrified. For some, it's winding up in like a dungeon, and they're being taken apart, or a lot of pain. For others, it's like the very first experience I had was in Boise, Idaho. I was talking to this woman who had a heart attack in a hospital, and for her, it was being in this isolated terrain where there was lots and lots of people standing close together. None of them were wearing clothes, and they were all looking at her. And to her, that was hell. They were just didn't say anything. They was just staring at her, glaring at her. Dozens and hundreds of people in this very barren terrain, and for her, that was hell.
yeah, I can understand
So they
that.
can be described different ways.
Yeah, that might be traumatic, no? When they come back to that, it might take some time to get back to the normal life, isn't it?
Well, I'd like to share both a positive and a negative. I was giving a talk at this large auditorium, and lots and lots of people were there. When I finished my talk, I invited anybody in the audience, if they would want to come forward and share their experience. 2 people did. First was a man. I would guess his age to be maybe in his early 30s.
Okay.
And he talked about this beautiful heavenly experience, and there were angels and all kinds of loving, beautiful things that were happening. And there literally wasn't a dry eye in the place. It was so beautiful. And then when it was over, he shocked everybody by saying this was the worst thing that ever happened to him.
Why?
He was sorry it ever happened. It had destroyed his life, and he considered it to be a curse. And then that woman stood up and talked about her experience, and it was dark, and it was stormy, and lots of clouds, and she fell into this pool, and she was being sucked down by a whirlpool, and she had to fight and fight and fight to get to the shore. And then she shocked everybody by saying this was the best thing that ever happened to her. She
What is that?
considered it to be a gift of God because it proved to her that no matter what happens in life, she can get out of it and do better.
Wow.
So, you know, here we have two cases, a man that had a beautiful experience and hated it, a woman who had a horrible experience and loved it. So I say to everybody, take a breath. Look at the experience. Talk about it with the individual. It depends on how you feel about what happened to you. Not all hellish cases are necessarily awful, and not all heavenly cases are necessarily wonderful. It's you, how you feel about it, and what it did to your life.
Oh, that's an interesting point of view. Also, that's the first time I hear that kind of things. Having a hellish experience and getting the most out of it, having a angelic experience and have the worst feeling about that. What a surprise!
Yeah.
What a surprise!
And I offer this as a caution to everybody.
Oh,
I offer this as a caution to everybody.
yeah.
Let's be careful how we judge these experiences.
Yeah.
Let's be very careful about what we call heaven and what we call hell.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe these are different stratas or different dimensions that are there for us to learn from,
Yeah.
and not necessarily what we think they are.
Yeah, that's the most surprising conclusion. Huh? Did you, something that always triggered me all over the talk that I've learned, that I've listened, that are available here and there, is the question that comes to my mind, doctor, is, do you still have some sort of a contact with that voice? Do you still hear that voice sometimes? Do you feel it?
If you're talking about me specifically,
Yes.
voice like none other.
Yeah.
That voice has only spoken to me 3 other times. That's all. Each time was very specific for a very special project. The guidance, though, and the feeling I have been able to integrate from my experiences,
Yeah.
has so enriched and enlivened my life,
Yeah.
that it absolutely fills me with joy. Every day is joy. It's just joy.
Yeah, I can see that. So, by studying this, doctor, do you think that the mission is not only to study, but to find out? I feel that there is like because healing for me, as I said to you previously, that it's very important. And I feel that even for the experiencers or the non-experiencers, knowing about this has a certain aspect of healing.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Can you describe that?
We're talking here about after effects. Always there are after effects. With most of them, not all, but with most of them, they're quite considerable. So we're talking about changes in brain structure, brain chemistry. We're talking about changes to the nervous system, the digestive system, and skin sensitivity. Many of them come back with electrical sensitivity. I'm one of them. Um, those are huge, huge, gigantic changes. And they're very, very specific. There's a whole list of them
Yeah.
that I have in all of my books. So, and you're really challenged to get back into life, where you are in your life, because you're different. You're thinking different. You're speaking different. You're feeling different, and that confuses the family.
And yourself, maybe. The
Look,
first.
the family wants back the person they lost.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And they don't want back a remodeled, refigured version of that person. They want the same person back. They don't get the same person back. Sorry, you're different.
Mm-hmm.
Let me share with you in my own personal experience, because this is really funny. My oldest daughter, now I have 3 kids, but my oldest daughter, Natalie, after my experience, I'm still back in Boise, Idaho. She came to me one day in the kitchen, and she put out her finger and she said, "Well, you're friendlier now than you used to be, and I like talking to you, but you're not Mom, and I want Mom back." We looked for that woman for years, never did find her. Don't know what happened to that woman. She's gone. Poof. You change in remarkable ways, and certainly your family notices this. And because of that, we have a divorce rate within about 5 to 6 years, between 77 to 80%. So the divorce rate is inordinately high. And I think it's because of this idea of unconditional love. I think that's the biggie. We're talking about unconditional love. Well, look, unconditional love is God's love. It's agape. You love everybody, absolutely everybody. But the family misunderstands this, and we misunderstand this, thinking that, unconditional love, I love everybody. But that's misinterpreted.
Yeah.
It's often seen by the family as you're flirting, or you're trying to, come on to somebody else. No, you're loving everybody.
Yes.
And unconditional love can be difficult to handle.
Yeah.
And just people misunderstand what it is.
Yes.
Let me give you an example. This fellow in Southern California, he's in his late 40s. He's married, second marriage. This one has 2 children.
Yeah. He
is a real estate salesman, real estate agent, doing very well.
Yes.
He's saying, after his near-death experience, he loves his wife more than he thought he could ever love. He loves his children so much. He loves his co-workers. Anyone who comes in to see him is, I just love everybody. And the next year, I called him back.
Yes.
He said, he says, I don't understand it. My wife won't have anything to do with me. My children won't be in the same room with me. I'm driving away all my clients. My fellow agents just turn their back and walk away. He said, I don't understand this. I'm more loving than I've ever been in my whole life, but I'm turning everybody off. And he He left his family, walked out the door. I don't know what happened to him. But we can have many tragedies that
Like,
come from unconditional love because we don't understand what we're talking about. And at the seminars of the International Association for Near-Death Studies, we often have special classes for parents or loved ones or spouses of near-death experiencers, so that they will understand what the experiencer is going through, and so they won't be put off by this or misunderstand what's happening and how much they have changed.
so the experiencers do not all come, do not, I would say, do not all become pastors and preachers and universal love messengers automatically. It is, they're normal people that have to deal with the real world of their family and surroundings. So that might be very difficult.
If you're looking at difficult, look at veterans, look at armed forces.
Yes.
Let me give you an example. This one fellow killed in action. His whole platoon, all killed. They all went, had an out of bikes, they're out here in the air, if you want to call it, the ether.
Yeah.
And they're all talking to each other, and they had all agreed to die at that moment in that way, except this one fellow. And they all told him, you were not supposed to die. You have to go back. You're not part of this agreement. You have to go back. So he was saved. And in surgery, he has this survivor's guilt. He said, he talked about the agreement and everything. And he said, you know, I can't be back here. I've got to die too. I can't be back here. But yet, he had to come back. And for him, it was grief. For him, it was really hard to handle. And we're finding this not only with our soldiers and, you know, people in the armed forces, we're finding it with police officers. We're finding it with lots of different people who their previous job, you know, required them to be a banker or dealing with a lot of money and being in charge of lots of other people, or, you know, having this other kinds of jobs, and they're finding it difficult to go back to the same job.
Yeah.
They don't want to handle all that money. They don't want to handle the gun. That, you know, it can be a real challenge to come back to near-death experience. It's not all pretty, but over time, if they can handle the after effects, it does get better and better and better.
Wow, I am absolutely astonished. Dr. Atwater, what about having another talk together, right? Because we didn't do like this about the child, and you are one of the most famous person that have talked to the child. Would you come back having a talk about the child in a next interview?
We've got to, because the little ones challenge what we think we know about the near-death experience. Absolutely. Please buy the book, The Forever Angels, Near-Death Experiences in Childhood and Their Lifelong Impact, because The child between birth and the age of 5 don't have a before.
Hmm. It's
And
a
because
complete
they
different.
don't have a before,
It's a complete different
it's
story.
a completely different.
And I think, as you
There.
said in a previous talk, and we're going to dig into that in our next talk, Doctor, that adolescence even is different than adults and then child, isn't it?
Yes, yes. It
Oh,
can be the same imagery, but the way that imagery is handled is
it's
completely
different.
completely different.
So,
Totally. And it will shock you.
yeah,
It will surprise you and shock you
yes, it might.
as to how they handle it.
Hmm.
Not
So
like any other.
we'll have a second talk about that because it's too important. Because yeah, I see you very happy. I am also. So we'll arrange a second interview, Doctor, and we'll talk about the children because it's so important for the subject
Yeah.
that. And you are almost the only one that have made such an in-depth study about the children to understand.
Yeah.
To
I'm the
understand
only
the phenomenon.
one.
You are the only one.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
Okay, so for this interview, that will be it because our time is gone. It's going like this so fast. Thank you so much. And that's an appointment. We're going to have a very soon another interview only for the kids and adolescents experience. Is that the deal with you?
Yes.
That's a deal.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Doctor. That's all for today. And I will meet you soon. We will arrange another interview very soon.
Thank you very much.
Have a good day. See you very soon.
Bye. Bye, everybody.
Goodbye.